right through the color of his skin. And just maybe his election, for all of its assaults on the Constitution, different in nature but just as insidious as many of his predecessors, maybe this will let us take a step where our racial politics is behind us.
Well, it should. And they asked Barack Obama once he got in, how long did this, first black president thing last? He says, about a day. He may have said even about an hour. It was a very short time. I look at him as a president. I look at him as a socialist president, but I look at him as a man, and certainly his politics, in my view, are flawed. But race has nothing to do with it. But the problem is, though, Judge, is anytime any of us come out in opposition to him, inevitably there will be people out there who say, "Well, you're a racist."
People have to fight aggressively against that, Phil. You have to fight against it, and I have to fight against it because we share common views on a lot of philosophical and political issues. I have not personally been accused of that, and I've been very, very aggressive with him. And the idea is to be consistent. I mean, I attacked the TARP program under George W. Bush, borrowing $700 billion and shoring up a wealthy bank that squandered its funds is just as bad as borrowing $700 billion and shoring up an automobile manufacturer that squandered its funds, whether a Republican does it or a Democrat does it. And when your criticism has a philosophical consistency to it, that usually shies people away from the attack of racism. But it is always there, and I suppose it will be always there, but an open, candid discussion about what African Americans went through is illuminating, though painful. Do you remember about a year ago, I know you remember this because I'm in radio like you, and everybody in radio was going, what the heck's going on here? When Jeremiah Wright was making all those speeches, and it looked like Barack Obama was going to sink like a rock in a pond. And some of the allegations he was making were off the wall, like the federal government caused AIDS and gave it to black people.
Right.
And I was getting callers, as you probably did, saying, you know what, Judge, it's a metaphor. He doesn't mean it literally. He just wants to remind you that the government has done evil things to people. Now I go back and I research, and there's a chapter about this in the book, the Tuskegee experiment.
Right.
And in the Tuskegee experiment, the United States federal government's public health service persuaded poor black men to entrust their health to the public health service, and it would take care of them. What did it do to them? It gave them syphilis. And it let them die slow, writhing, painful deaths, and it monitored their
just
bodily
so they could
functions.
study them.
Right, over the course of years as they died. I mean, this was akin to the biological experiments that the Nazis were performing at the same time in Germany. This went on until 1972, until Richard Nixon, of all people, learned of it and put a stop to it immediately. So every president, from Herbert Hoover in 1932 to Richard Nixon in 1972, knew about it, and only Nixon stopped it. And so if a Jeremiah Wright wants to make a point by exaggeration, there is a kernel of truth in his allegation that this is what a white racist government did to poor black men in Tuskegee, Alabama.
It's unbelievable. And you talk about that in the book, too. Let me ask you something else, too, because you and I have talked over the years, and I've been on Fox News with Hannity and O'Reilly and the rest of them, talking the political issues. I cannot believe how far we have gone to the left and how fast we're galloping towards socialism in just the last few months. And really, as you touched on, it didn't start with Barack Obama. It started with George W. Bush and opening up the door to socialism. He saddled the horse. Barack Obama's riding it.
Well, in a sense, Bush, in the case of Bush, it's even worse because he ran ostensibly and verbally defending the free market. In my opinion, without opening up a can of worms here, in my opinion, George W. Bush showed less fidelity to the Constitution than any president since Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the things he did with the Patriot Act, with NSA spying, and with borrowing money and purchasing assets with it are so far beyond anything even remotely contemplated by the Constitution that he bears a great deal of the blame for what we're doing now. The concept of TARP, the Troubled Assets relief program, just made it so much easier. This was done by a conservative Republican. Just imagine what a liberal Democrat could do. Now, Barack Obama in 100 days has spent twice what Bush spent in his last 100 days. but it was the camel's nose under the tent. And what we used to condemn as fascism, private ownership but government control, and what we used to condemn as socialism, government appropriating property, paying for it but owning it, is happening right before our eyes.
And we have George Bush to thank for it.
AIG and Fannie and Freddie and Citibank and Bank of America and Chrysler are private ownership and government control. General Motors, if this bankruptcy goes through, and I'm looking at Barack Obama on the screen smiling to the King of Saudi Arabia, I don't know what he's smiling about. If the General Motors bankruptcy goes through, then everybody listening to your voice and mine will own General Motors.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it right there, Judge. Always a pleasure to have you on. It's called Dred Scott. Dred Scott's Revenge is a new book from Judge Andrew Napolitano. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you very much.
Mine. Thank you, Phil.
All right. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Judge. Quick time out. We're going to be back in a moment. 1-800-618-PHIL. That's 1-800-618-7445. Stay put. We'll be right back.